Hey guys, thanks for stopping by. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone in Seattle, or the CHAZ, as people are calling it. I want to talk about, what it is, why it's important, and what should the government do about it, if anything. And just to remind you, if this is your first time here, I'm a former police officer. I was an officer for about 9 years, and now I study police use of force as a PhD student. And I make these videos not to be critical of police or citizens, but just to create an environment where people can have an open and honest discussion about what's happening and plot a course together for the future of policing in the United States. So if you find these videos useful, if they're helpful to you at all, please hit the subscribe button down below. That ensures that more people get to see these. So let's switch on over to some video I have. I'm just going to show a clip of some news clips and some video of this area so that we just have an idea of what exactly it is.
Protesters have created a so-called autonomous zone just days after Seattle police boarded up and abandoned the East Precinct.
The protesters insist everything is peaceful, but police say they are hearing about business owners facing extortion and intimidation.
I just find it unusual that the fire chief is doing this by himself.
And what I'm finding is that, so following the George Floyd murder and the uprisings, protests, riots around the country, whatever you want to call them, there's been this space in Seattle that has been cordoned off and is being controlled by some individuals who are calling an autonomous zone and taking over a police precinct. And I'm finding that my friends, a lot of my policing friends and people who tend to lean to the right, are saying, this is Antifa organizing some type of new state, and that's going to spread around the country and start a civil war. And then on the other side, my more liberal friends are saying, how beautiful this is. This is a space that's being created for a free exchange of ideas, sort of anarchist experiment, like Paris 1848, and are all for it. Then there's people that are sort of fall in the middle. So just so you have an idea what it is, and just take a listen to this. So the police are not allowed in there, but this is someone from the fire department. So this is a state representative who is working in this zone. I think it's interesting, his comments.
Well, we got a team. We're working through this, and there's some trust built, and I don't want to compromise the trust.
So you see somebody who she asked why it's odd that someone from the fire department is coming in here, but in this particular situation, the police department can't effectively go in and interact with the people that are in there. This just doesn't seem productive. So I think it's great that someone from the fire department is moving into the space and trying to develop some sort of lines of communication and begin that process.
Anecdotally, reports of citizens and businesses being asked to pay a fee to operate within this area. This is the crime of extortion.
But a protest,
or some people might call it taxes.
co-leader says not so.
So yeah, definitely no extortion. No, definitely not. We've invited people to come in.
We did not see any extortion or intimidation or armed people, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. Police say they want to negotiate with protest leaders to return officers to the precinct, but both police and protesters admit there are.
They don't know who the leaders are. So this is sort of this organic thing that's taking place. I'm sure there are people who are organizing and showing leadership, whatever that might mean in this situation. But I think it's interesting that different sides can view this in completely different ways. Now I'm going to compare that incident to another incident. And if you guys remember Clive and Bundy, and there was a sort of ranch where they seized some territory and wouldn't allow the police to maintain control over it. And the police, I think, handled it in a very similar way. So just to refresh everyone's memory here.
No leader.
Hey, Sheriff, this is
a couple years back.
The people are asking this morning. Disarm the Park Service.
I want everyone to know for the record.
Okay.
I contacted 911.
I guess he's not coming, so I guess we had presence. We thought we had a sheriff here, but evidently we don't have a sheriff here. His 5 minutes is up. Now we're going to go and take our land back and declare freedom and liberty here in this land.
Tell me why it's important.
It's our rights.
It's your rights? Okay.
They're already taking everything away from us.
Yeah, the federal government they lease our public lands. It's time the states take back our public lands. The BLM doesn't know how to manage
What do you think about children being down there and possibly in the line of fire if something happens?
You know what? If you're in the line of fire, then ban on the sheriff's.
But what do you think about the children being? Do you think the children should be down there right now?
It's just how it's remarkable how similar these two, in my mind, how similar these two events are. If you just listen to the second set of clips, the people are making a very, very similar argument to CHAZ. They're saying that we no longer trust the government to manage security in this particular area where we don't feel as though our interests are being represented, that we feel as though we're being oppressed. They set up a defined, there's a defined sort of geographical space they were controlling. They were armed. They were, this was a real standoff and a challenge to the state's authority. And what I thought was that the state handled are handling and handled these situations in very similar ways, where they sort of recognize the danger of the situation, and that it's not a dichotomous sort of situation where either the state has a full monopoly on the use of force and control of geographical territory or they don't. There's varying degrees of control that can be exerted in a given space by the police, by the state. And it's a delicate dance between the state and the individuals, the state and groups, and powers moving and flowing throughout society. And at certain times, the state can exercise full authority, and other times, there's varying degrees of authority that can be exercised. I think some of the incidents I think back to are like Waco and Ruby Ridge, where you have, in this particular instance, we're talking about sort of the left side of the spectrum, and these other instances we're talking about the right side of the spectrum. But I believe it's the same phenomena, where the state is lacking in legitimacy amongst a certain group of people, and are reduced to a situation where the only option they have is to either do nothing or use force. When you're in a position where your only option is to use force, it's really, for me, a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you don't have the institutional trust and ties to the community to shape behavior in less overt ways. So you have these incidents. Think about Waco. Think about how that backfired when the state moves in, or Ruby Ridge when the state moves in, and it energizes, it makes martyrs of individuals. And I think that with the Bundy standoff, that the government had learned a lesson from other incidents and realized, hey, if we move in and we end up killing this Bundy or his supporters, that's going to create an even larger problem. And then move fast forward to CHAZ. And I recognize when I hear people say, well, you can't just let people take over sections of a city. Or other people say, well, this is some beautiful experiment in democracy. I see both sides of that. So I recognize the dangers of ceding territory to people. You're no longer in charge of territory. That's the state's responsibility. And then at the same time, I watch the videos of these people engaging in conversations in the CHAZ, and I think it's beautiful and productive in many respects. So it's a confusing sort of situation, but imagine if the state were to really assert itself and use force to reclaim this territory. And during that, what's going to happen is there's going to be there will be violence used that will be videotaped. Those images will be broadcast around the country, and this could become make things much worse. Imagine if 3 people got killed during this, and those names would instantly become famous names. I can imagine the CHAZ 3 as a rallying cry all across the country to seize sections of cities. So it's not just we are the state and we control the territory or not. It's, again, like a delicate dance. And I think that the fireman that I saw, the supervisor from the fire department, finding the aspects of your institution that do have bonds with the community and placing the emphasis on strengthening those areas and those lines of communications is a very good beginning. So I want to commend the fire department for that work. And I know in the beginning of this video, I wanted to say, what CHAZ was. I think we've done that. Why it's important. I think we understand why it's important. And what the government should do is the difficult question. My recommendation would be not to put yourself in a position where the only options you have is to do nothing or use violence to assert yourself, because that's a very weak position to be in. Over an extended period of time, by strengthening communities, by creating an environment where people can thrive, you won't have these problems. It's when we place people in economic and social distress day after day after day, and they're going from one emergency to another, that leaves our society susceptible to these types of movements. So I hope this was helpful. If it was, please hit subscribe. If you have any questions, comments, or anything that you want addressed through video, please let me know. And again, thank you very much for your time. I really do appreciate it. Be safe.